So, if you're part of the Utah Jazz fandom and you haven't been living under a rock, then you realize that Darius Bazley, along with one Kenneth Lofton Jr., were both cut roughly about a week ago at this point. I actually had a video with a suggested depth chart or how I expected people to be played in the rotation this year based on the roster that we had on hand, which happened to drop literally the day after. Unfortunately, I recorded it previous to them being cut naturally. But with that being said, I just wanted to go over some of the facts of the situation and what world we're living in, particularly as to why they got cut and what we can expect going forward. So if you're into the Utah Jazz or if you like NBA content in general, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into this one. One of the first people to report on it happened to be one Bob Marks, who said that the Utah Jazz announced they released Kenneth Lofton Jr. and Darius Bazley. Both players' contracts were set to, remember, be $400K if they were on the roster past July 25th. It was July 24th, the day that they got cut, unfortunately. It was a tough move to make, at least from the outside looking in. Of course, we don't have any guarantees as far as how the front office was, but the overall sentiment just quite simply seemed to be that they just didn't do enough. And it was unfortunate because I was very fond of Darius Bazley, slightly over Kenneth Lofton Jr., though he had his own positives, and he honestly just got in better shape overall as the season progressed, or rather the offseason progressed. Because going into last season, he was a G League lot guy. He was kind of all over the place. He's had highs in the NBA when he was with the Memphis Grizzlies for a short stint, scored 42 points, but he just hasn't really been able to stick with any team since this whole circus really began. And then he found a home with the Utah Jazz G League team and eventually got brought up at the end of the season. We were effectively just tanking everything out. And we got to see what he would look like along with some of the other guys on the roster that had been in the G League or just had been playing on two-way deals or just hadn't been seeing much minutes at all. In 2023, Kenneth Lofton Jr. was with the Memphis Grizzlies, the team that originally had the rights to him. And then going into this season, he actually saw the chopping block that saw him end up in Philly for 2 games after playing only 15 games this year in Memphis. Then Utah obviously put him on the Summer League team, and when the end of the season rolled around and he had the opportunity to play, he did play. He didn't start in any games, but he played in 4 overall matches, playing 22.8 minutes. He averaged 13.8 points, 5 rebounds, 4.8 assists, 0.8 steals, 0.5 blocks. He shot 60% from the field and 33% from 3 on 3 attempts, so that was pretty pleasant. And then from the free throw line, he was 81.8% on roughly 3 attempts a game, giving him a total true shooting percentage of 69%. And I think that honestly, he had the best opportunity to just show out and showcase who he was as a player. Because if you go and look at his other teams or the other seasons that he's had, all 2 of them, to be honest, the Memphis Grizzlies, his first year, he played 24 games. He started in 1. He only played 7.3 minutes. You're not going to get a decent sample size of anything, even though he was decently productive from the field. The numbers are too low. The next year, going into this past season, in the 15 games that he ended up playing, he didn't get any starts. He played 6.6 minutes. Still abysmal. For Philly, he was only there for 2 games. So 4.5 minutes isn't going to tell you much about anything in regards to him or any other player in particular. Again, the fact of the matter simply remains, he's not the greatest player on defense. We understand that. As 6'6" and previously listed as 275, I recognize that he is significantly beneath that at this point, but he's still got a little bit of girth, a little bit of bulk to him. He's just not as lucrative of an option for a lot of teams. When we had him on the main roster for a short period of time, we allowed him to run a little bit of a round mound of rebound reincarnation type of role mixed with a little bit of Jokic, allowing him to initiate the offense, which is why he averaged 4.8 assists across those 4 games. And he looked pretty solid. So coming into the Summer League, we had high expectations for him, but he struggled. My goodness. He struggled mightily. Now, he had 2 pretty solid games, and he had a third game that he had 2 other games that were kind of like middle of the road. There was some positives to take, there was some negatives to take, but the rest of it was just bad, like 1 of 7, 1 of 8, 1 of 9 shooting. And that's admittedly just the summer league, but at the same time, when you've been doing it for a minute and you've been bouncing around, you have to show that you are that guy. And he was initiating the offense a lot of times. He was the guy that was crashing the glass. He was trying to make different plays. And with him having slimmed down, he was a little bit more mobile, and it was noticeable. He also was willing to shoot a three a lot more. And in the games that he looked good, he was hitting those threes. In the games that he wasn't looking good, he missed those threes. So it was kind of a coin flip with him, if I'm going to be quite honest. And I do understand that you don't want to take away the space and opportunity of minutes for other guys in order to give him particularly minutes. That's understandable. I thought that Darius Bazley was also the better out of the two when we're looking at this roster construction. If you don't enjoy Kenneth Lofton, you think, okay, he's not going to be able to be a small ball five, even though it would be interesting. And if he can get his jumper down, giving him the benefit of the doubt. If he can get his jumper down, he can be a solid playmaker, and he can continue to be a solid rebounder. We can live with some of the defensive ineptitudes, right? The pick and roll switches aren't going to be terrific, but we can live with them because he's slimmed down a little bit. He's in better shape, but he still has the strength to bang with a lot of the heavier guys that are down there in the paint. Cool. Why would you bank that hard on him and that's just me looking at it from the front office point of view. Why would you bank so hard on that when you have so many rookies? We have like 6 guys under 22 at this point. So with the draft class going as heavy as it did in such a positive way, because remember, Isaiah Collier, Kyle Filipowski, and Cody Williams, none of the 3 of those guys were supposed to be available when we took them. So the fact that we overachieved in the draft really just put the nail in the coffin alongside him being poor in the summer league, because it was like, okay, we're going to let him play it out. We're going to see what happens. It was they were originally signed to a 3-year non-guarantee deal, both him and Darius Bazley when they first got brought on. But then it became a thing of, okay, well, can he prove that he deserves a spot? And then once we had the draft, it's like, wow, can he really prove that he deserves this spot, that he's earned this spot, that he should be given a priority slot over some of these guys that are showing a lot of promise and honestly have probably higher ceilings than him, at the very least on our particular roster. And he wasn't able to do that in the summer league. And so by default, even though $400,000 is nothing by NBA money, it would have been nice to see him have that, but they let him go. They cut him. Moving on to Darius Bazley, his story is a little bit similar, but there's some key differences. Darius Bazley, to me, is a very interesting prospect. I thought that he was a lot more enjoyable to watch, at least from a where the league is going and how playable you're going to be on a night-to-night basis standard by comparison to Kenneth Lofton Jr., but it just still, again, wasn't enough. I was applauding him in the summer league because he did a lot of things right. One of the things that he doesn't do very well, though, is shoot the 3 ball. And because of that, and it being a wingman's league and also a 3-point shooting league, if your best assets are cleaning up the glass, being a lob threat, streaking the floor, and playing defense, no matter how great that is, you're not going to be able to stay in everybody's system. And that limitation in his inability to shoot ultimately put him on the chopping block, because they're not going to force feed him minutes when they now have Kyle Filipowski, who was not supposed to be available in the second round, added onto their roster alongside the expected development of Walker Kessler, hopefully taking a step forward in his 3rd season now after he really didn't go anywhere in his most recent year, in his year 2. And then you still have John Collins on the roster because you weren't able to trade him this offseason. So there's few and far in between minutes to go around, alongside the fact that apparently they added on one Tyler Eubanks. So it really just felt like he was an afterthought after a certain point, despite how solid he played in the summer league. Now, his numbers didn't jump off the page, and I think that's another thing, because you had some guys that showed flashes. You had some guys that were like solid all the way through, and you had some guys that just played abysmal overall by comparison to what their expectations were, like your Kenneth Lofton Jr.'s. But Darius Bazley, to me, was one of those solid guys that just didn't do enough to boost his stock and boost his ability to just be present. Now, he has played for a couple teams. He's been in the league since 2019-2020 season. He was picked up by the Oklahoma City Thunder originally. He played in 61 games, started in 9 of them. He averaged 18.5 minutes, so a decent sample size of minutes, I suppose. 5.6 points, 4 rebounds, half an assist, half a steal, half a block. 39% from the field, 34% from three on 2.3 attempts a game. So that would lead you to think that he could shoot threes viably. However, in his follow-up season in 2020-2021, he played in 55 games and started all 55 games, playing 31.2 minutes, averaging 13.7 points, 7.2 rebounds, 1.8 assists, half a steal, half a block. He shot 39.6% from the field on 12.5 attempts, while also attempting 5.2 threes and shooting 29%. So effectively, he really hasn't been a consistent three-point shooter since then. The following season, on about 4 attempts, he was 29.7%. After that, he was 1.3 attempts for 40%. And then he went to Phoenix for 7 games also after his Oklahoma City days and was shooting 25% on 1.1 attempts. So the three-point jumper is, safe to say, not there. Then you follow that up with a short stint of all of 3 games with the Philadelphia 76ers, followed up by his term with the Utah Jazz this season. By the way, they were both in the 2023-2024 year. And with the Jazz, he played 6 games on the main roster. Previous to this, he was obviously on the Salt Lake City Stars, which is the G League affiliate team of the Utah Jazz. He played in 6 games on the main roster. He averaged 23.7 minutes per game. He put together 8 points, 4.5 rebounds, 0.8 assists, 1 steal, 1.2 blocks. He also shot 62.1% from the field on 5 attempts. He shot 25% from 3 on 1.3 attempts. So it was not the prettiest from the shooting standpoint, but overall, from what he was expected to do on the floor, he looked really good. And defensively, he gave us everything that we would have wanted, but it just, quite frankly, wasn't enough. And it's unfortunate because, like I said, I was very high on Darius Bazley. I don't think that he's, going to be a superstar or a starter long-term, but he's definitely a solid rotation piece for a lot of teams. And when you need somebody that can clean up the glass very strongly, they're able to be somewhat of a rim deterrent, particularly on the help side defensive range. He can also get steals. He's rangy. He's 215, so he could stand to gain a little bit of weight. But if you're just looking for somebody that can move from bigs to wings, he's a really lucrative type of player. I really enjoyed watching him play. And while he didn't do anything that jumped off the page and wowed the fans and anything like that, it is unfortunate that, people didn't appreciate it, I guess, as much as I did. But I also understand that the NBA is a business. The players that are on the main roster are on the main roster for a reason. And for Darius Bazley and Kenneth Lofton Jr., despite how they may have been fan favorites or may have just been liked in the fan base for their short term here, it just wasn't meant to work out this way. That doesn't mean that they're going to be out of the league. I would expect another team to at least put them on their G League roster, if not have them on their main roster for some support and depth off the bench. I think Darius Bazley will probably get the call before Kenneth Lofton Jr. just because his ability to be rangier on defense, because yes, scoring is important, but there's a lot of guys in the league that can score. If you can't play defense, but you can kind of score, that's not necessarily going to guarantee you a spot. But if you can score kind of and really play defense, that's more likely to lock you in somewhere. So for that reason, and also just the size, range, and just general build, where and what Darius Bazley can really do and what he can play, honestly, if you are just any team looking for somebody with his particular skill set, because more teams are just, quite frankly, looking for his skill set over Kenneth Lofton Jr. With that being said though, to harp on something else that was brought up in those news stories that I just wanted to touch on a little bit. The Jazz will now currently at this moment have $37.7 million in their salary cap space. To reach the floor, the minimum salary floor, according to the new CBA deal and everything, Utah has to spend $23.7 million within this upcoming month. So I'm assuming that a lot of that's going to end up going towards Lauri Markkanen's restructured contract. Obviously, when he re-signs, ideally on August 7th, so that the trade rumors could be put to rest, they're going to likely front load that contract heavily like they did with Jordan Clarkson, because that just made the most sense. And even though Jordan Clarkson, that's a whole separate video, the fact that nobody wants him because of he literally had the worst shooting career year ever for himself personally. And even though he's on a team-friendly contract, because he got front-loaded like Lowry is likely to experience upcoming with this year, it just wasn't enough. So I would be on the lookout for either somebody else getting a restructured / re-sign type of contract, or a potential trade that could bring on somebody just so that the Jazz can end up reaching the floor. And what a lot of teams, particularly since the Jazz will be expected to tank this year, there are teams that will be in this sort of area of basketball where they're willing to take on bad contracts or terrible contracts just for the sole purpose of helping out another team, and maybe they'll get some draft compensation in exchange just because they have the money to spend and they want to get over the floor so that they don't lose the benefits that they currently have. I think that it's a smart idea to do if there's a team like the Pacers or somebody else that has a particular player that, you know, they're an okay player, but they're not deserving of the money that they're currently getting paid, and you want to send them to the Utah Jazz fandom just to ride out a year and, you know, fade into oblivion, then I'm all here for it as long as we can reach that floor so it doesn't like really restrict us. But again, I would just say stay on the lookout for it. If it does end up happening though, you'll find out here first on the channel. As always, it's your boy Wraith Hoops. Thanks for tuning in this video. Go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and become a member or drop a dono to help support the channel. Let me know what you guys think about it. What was your fondest memory of Darius Bazley and Kenneth Lofton Jr.? Or is there something that might have been at play that you think that wasn't really discussed? With that being said, as always, good morning, good evening, and good night, no matter where you're on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.